Hello, everybody. I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings. So this is one of the sequels to Black Trillium, Blood Trillium. And as I said, Julian May, Andre Norton, and Marion Zimmer Bradley, they each did their sequels. But the sequels that they did to Black Trillium were not associated with each other. They obviously they came out of the same source material, um, but they ultimately were not. They ultimately weren't made in concert with each other, paying attention to what the others were doing or saying. And so, when you read them, uh, they don't quite fit together, and the timelines of these sequels don't link up, and so ultimately, you might as well consider each of these sequels to be starting alternate timelines for each of these because the world building in them is different one from another. The details, the histories that develop in these are different, so that in particular Marion Zimmer Bradley's book, which is the next video, not this one, um the details from this don't lead into Lady of the Trillium, which is important because that one takes place some 200 years later, give or take. So, in the course of Blood Trillium, we're picking up some 10, 15 years, give or take, after the end of Black Trillium. And what happens in this book is that the three sisters, who started out in the first book being very, very different people who eventually had to develop as people and come together as a unit and understand each other better and grow as people. This book echoes that story once more, that their years of following their separate paths in life, Haramis as the Archimage, that is sorceress protector of what is now known as Labo Ruenda, and Kadiya, who has become a representative of the folk, the oddlings, these non-human, vaguely amphibian peoples, that Kadiya has basically become a representative of those people, for humans in an attempt to negotiate pieces and treaties and things like that between them. And Anigel has become the queen of Labo Ruenda. That is Labernock, the country that initially invaded Ruenda, their native kingdom. Because at the end of Black Trillium, she marries the Prince of Labernock, and so they decided to make a portmanteau name smoosh of Labernock and Ruenda, and the only way to do that properly is to take the R in Labernock and just use it to slide into Ruenda. Because the only other option, I mean, they could have made it a hyphenated name, but obviously that's not what Julian May chose in this. Anyhow, so what's happened, however, over the years is they've sort of parted ways. Haramis has been off in a tower in the middle of nowhere, trying to do the job of Archimage. The problem is that she got dropped into being Archimage without any real warning, without any training, without any understanding of what it meant. So she's been doing her best, but she doesn't really understand it, and she doesn't have proper training, and so there's a large portion of this where she's just trying to figure out what's going on. And each of the sisters has sort of a primary theme of what they've been doing that has sort of led them into not living up to their proper potential. In Haramis's case, it's that she has wound up doing the thing that scholars and academics are notorious for, and that is getting so lost in scholarly pursuits, getting so lost in just trying to figure out the whys and wherefores that you stop doing things and spend all of your time uh focusing on academic details. Kadiya, meanwhile, in her work as a representative for the Oddlings, lost has tended to and lost sight of um, complexity. That is part of the problem with it's the problem with environmental issues, it's the problem with all sorts of political issues, and that is that a government can't just say we're going to fix the environment problem because people need to have jobs, people need to have an economy that continues ticking over. And while it's all very well and good to say, if we don't solve the environment, global warming, whatever, then we're not going to have a planet. But at the same time, if you don't provide people with a means of making a living, you're not going to have much of a functional economy, functional country either. In Kadia's case, she's taken up the cause of the Oddlings, of the Nisomu and the Glismac and the Wavilo and all of those other peoples, but she doesn't pay attention to the fact that Anigel and Antar, the king and queen of Labaruenda, cannot simply do what she wants with the Glismac and so on, because they do have human citizens and they do have ongoing political issues and ties and discussions and treaties with other countries that also have to be maintained. Anigel, meanwhile, has basically thrown herself into being a wife and mother and has lost sight to an extent of the greater cause outside of her immediate life, out of her immediate family, her immediate royal problems. And so the course of this book is very much about Anigel broadening her scope once more to realize that she is queen, that is, somebody who is in charge of a country, and that means her decisions cannot be predicated solely on her husband and her children. Haramis has to learn to broaden her scope back out and realize that her job is to do things in, around, and with the world, not merely bury herself in her books. And Kadiya has to broaden her scope and realize once more that there are things other than what she's looking at, and that simple solutions are not always the solutions to problems. And so these three sisters, the title Blood Trillium, obviously it derives from the first, Black Trillium. Black Trilliums in these books are the symbol of the royal family of Rwanda. They are apparently a somewhat magical plant, and each of the sisters has an amulet, which is a piece of amber with a fossilized black trillium in it. In Blood Trillium, when these sisters develop an enmity between them, because Kadiya is more concerned about retrieving her magical talisman than the safety and well-being of, various people, and Anigel is so concerned about the safety and well-being of her family that she is willing to ignore anything else, and Haramis gets so concerned with learning things, and the fact that she is apparently in love with Origastus, which I thought wasn't really implied in the first book, because Origastus has managed to escape from a prison he was sent to at the end of the last book. They thought they had destroyed him, but he, in fact, had been sent to a prison, and he escaped it, and has been running around causing trouble. Haramis is apparently in love with him, which is an odd concept, because infatuation seemed more the thing in the last book than love, but eh. In any event, the sisters, their black trilliums turn red as blood in their various amulets as their relationship falls apart, and it isn't until they can forgive each other genuinely rather than just saying the words, and are able to broaden their scopes and see the larger picture again. At that point, their blood trilliums turn back into being black ones, which is where the title comes from. And this is an interesting book, not least of which because at the end of the book, throughout the book, Anigel's youngest son has been suffering from the youngest child syndrome. That is, why do the others get to have all the fun? Why do my older siblings get to do all the cool stuff? Why don't I get to stay up late? Why don't I get to have a thing? Why is everyone always talking down to me? And the problem is, of course, that he's 9 years old. He's a child. He doesn't always understand what's going on. And he winds up making a few bad choices because he's a kid and kids make bad choices. And at the end of this, he finds out what's actually going on and redeems himself, winding up with having bound Anigel's magical talisman to himself. And it's a very, very interesting story because what I think what makes it so interesting is pretty much everybody is treated sympathetically among the good guys. I at least didn't find myself looking at any of them and thinking, wow, what you're doing is completely irrational and stupid for who you are. The sisters do, especially Kadiya and Anigel, they do get a little selfish and a little overwrought and a whole bunch of other things, but it's a very, very extreme situation, and the character building in this one is good. There's a certain amount of eye rolling that happens, but at the same time, the characters do seem to evolve naturally out of the characters we saw in the last book, and it's very interesting as world building. Now I forgot last time that I had taken the map. Haha. This is the map of Rwanda. And so you can see one of the interesting things about the cover of the last book was that it was Snowy Mountain, but the bulk of the book takes place in these massive, in the Golden Mire and the Thorny Hell and all of this. There's a lot of swamp in this book. Over here, sorry about the rapid flicking, this is the map from Black Trillium, which is a larger world map. It's, again, this is very much a world-building book. Anyhow, I'm basically out of time, so I'm going to finish up here. If you want to look up Sky Trillium, which I believe is the sequel to this, you can do that, and I will see you all next week with Lady of the Trillium.